American Revolution. How did the colonists win the American Revolution? Introduction. You have learned how the American colonies declared their independence from Great Britain from 1775 to 1783. Colonists fought in the American Revolution to win their freedom. A revolution is the overthrow of one government and its replacement with another. The two sides in the war used different strategies or overall plans to try to win the war. We'll win this war and be back home in no time. At first, Great Britain seemed sure to succeed. It had a large navy. Its army was made up of skilled, full-time soldiers. There isn't many of us here. I don't even know how to use this thing. The Continental Army of the colonies was small and untrained. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. The British won most of the early battles. This is my home and I will defend it. America, born and raised! The colonial soldiers, or the Continentals, had some advantages. They had stronger reasons for wanting to win. They were defending their homes and their rights. Unlike the British, they were fighting on familiar lands. Also, foreign countries that were allies of the colonies sent aid to the struggling colonies. The following key vocabulary words will help you better understand the text as you follow along. Revolution, the overthrow of one government and its replacement with another. Strategy, an overall plan for winning a war, such as how and where to use in army or navy. Volunteer, a person who performs a service for free. Enlist, to agree to serve in an army or a navy. Mercenary, a soldier hired to fight for a foreign army. Tactic, a planned action such as a way of moving or using troops aimed at reaching a certain goal. Turning point, an event that leads to a dramatic change. Treaty, a formal agreement between two or more nations. The Continental Army. I think we need an army. When the war started, there was no American army. Instead, colonies had their own militias. I can only work for a while because I need to get back to the farm. These were made up of part-time soldiers like those who fought the British soldiers at Lexington and Concord. In 1775, the Second Continental Congress asked George Washington to lead a new army. I have a farm in New York. I own a store in Trenton, New Jersey. This Continental Army was made up of volunteers. Most of these men were poor farmers, merchants, and workers. Honey, I'm home. At the start of the war, they enlisted in the army for about 1 year at a time. Then they returned home to take care of their families. Historians estimate that 8,000 to 24,000 men were in Washington's army at any one time, including many African Americans. Women took part as well. They cooked for the soldiers, mended uniforms, and cared for the sick and wounded. Some women even fought in battles. We're broke. But the Continental Army had a number of serious problems. Congress had little money to pay the soldiers or buy supplies for the army. I wear the uniform and I hold the gun, but I'm not really sure how to be a soldier in this Continental Army. As a result, the volunteers were poorly supplied with uniforms and guns. In addition, these men knew very little about being soldiers. Yes, sir! Washington worked hard to train his men. He taught them to obey orders and to fight together. In speeches and written messages, he encouraged them to believe that they could beat the mighty British forces. Like the Continental Army, the colonial navy was small. It was made up of trade and fishing trips that carried little cannons. With their inexperienced army and tiny navy, the colonies were like a weak man about to fight a powerful giant. The British Army. We are going to win this war in no time. I don't know what accent that was. At the start of the war, Great Britain was confident that it would soon end the revolution. It had one of the strongest military forces in the world. The British Navy's 270 warships controlled the seas. British shipyards built another 200 warships during the war. Great Britain's army was large and well-trained. Its soldiers were paid, and serving in the army was their full-time job. Most soldiers were experienced fighters. Their leaders disciplined them harshly. A soldier could be whipped for using bad language. I have money for all. Unlike the American Congress, the British Parliament had money to buy food and weapons for its army. Each soldier was given a uniform, a musket, a short sword, and a bayonet or a sharp blade. Soldiers attached their bayonets to the front ends of their muskets to use in close fighting. Wir sind Soldaten in der britischen Army. There were about 48,000 soldiers in the British Army. Most were poor men who earned low pay. Some were from other countries. Great Britain hired about 30,000 mercenaries from Germany to fight in America. If you and your tribe fight for the British crown, you will protect your lands. Thousands of Native Americans joined the British as well. They sided with Great Britain because in 1763, the British had helped protect their lands from settlers. Thousands of Loyalists also fought for Great Britain. New York's many Loyalists joined the British side at the start of the war. The British Army is far from home. The British Army and Navy were strong, but the British had a major problem. They were far from home. Supplies, military orders, and soldiers had to travel 3,000 miles by sea across the Atlantic Ocean. Row, row, row. The trip from Great Britain to America could take 3 months. Once British ships crossed the ocean, it was often hard to get the cargo ashore. The Continentals had few naval ships to attack the British warships. But they did call on hundreds of privateers. Privateers were small, fast ships with few light cannons. Congress gave the captains of the privateers permission to attack British supply ships. Ship captains could keep most of the goods they captured. Later in the war, French warships also attacked British ships. Our weapons come from the northern colonies, and our food supplies come mostly from the southern colonies. Unlike the British, Continental troops were fighting in their home country and could get supplies more easily. I have some food for y'all in the house. In addition, as the war went on, the Continental Army found new ways of getting weapons and supplies. Often, local citizens sold or gave the army food. American troops captured cannons and muskets from the British. I've got to take care of the farm and family while my husband is away fighting the war. American women also helped the Continental Army. They ran farms and businesses while the men were away fighting. Women brought supplies to the camps, made uniforms, and worked as nurses. They also spied among the British. No food for you! In contrast, the British had to fight in a country that was not their home. Most colonists refused to give them food or supplies. The British often felt as though they were surrounded by people who disliked them and even hated them. These feelings made the troops less eager to fight. The Continental Army is motivated to win. Continental soldiers had a special advantage over the British, stronger motivation or desire to win. Continental soldiers believed they were defending the rights described in the Declaration of Independence. I'm fighting for my family. They were fighting to make a better future for themselves and their families. Many thought that these were goals worth dying for. Washington's troops showed this strong motivation at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, in the bitterly cold winter of 1777 through 1778, and they weren't really smiling at that time. They were tired and starving. Many didn't have warm clothing or even shoes. More than 2,500 men died that winter from cold and sickness, yet the army didn't give up. I'm so far from home, I don't really want to be here, but it is my job. The British soldiers had less motivation. Most of them fought because it was their job. They were not defending their homes or their freedoms. I have so many more colonies to worry about. And Parliament had other problems besides the war. It had colonies to protect outside of North America. It had strong enemies like France and Spain, and many people in Great Britain didn't want to pay for a war in distant North America. Fight for us, and when we win this war, you will be free. Of course, not all Americans wanted to fight the British. Loyalists still believed that independence was unwise. In addition, the British sometimes promised to free slaves who joined their side. As a result, some African Americans fought for the British. As you have learned, many Native Americans also fought for the British in hopes of protecting their lands. Different war strategies. The British and the American armies used different war strategies. Each tried to use its strengths. The British fought an offensive war. They attacked the Continental Army. Their aim was to control key cities and the countryside. The Continental troops fought a defensive war. Their goal was to protect themselves from attacks by the British Army rather than destroy it. Let's get this over with. At first, the British tried to end the war quickly. They won the Battle of Bunker Hill near Boston in June 1775. They kept control of Boston, the city they thought was the main Patriot stronghold. but they soon learned that men across the colonies would fight for independence. I have an idea. In August 1776, the British took control of New York City after the Battle of Long Island. Washington moved his men into the countryside. From there, the Continental Army used tactics not common for that time. Patriot troops made surprise attacks on small groups of British soldiers and then retreated. Sharpshooters hid in the woods and shot British soldiers one by one. These tactics puzzled British troops who preferred to meet their enemy face to face. Here, patriot, patriot, patriot! So the British changed their strategy. They tried to use their better trained troops to openly engage Washington's troops in battle. But one night, in December 1776, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Washington sneaked his troops across the Delaware River from Pennsylvania to New Jersey. There, in the Battle of Trenton, they surprised and defeated German mercenaries who were celebrating Christmas. Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht. This was a key early Patriot victory. We need to take the city of Philadelphia. By 1777, the British generals were determined to force Washington's army into the open. To do this, the British took the key city of Philadelphia. In order to protect my men, I must let them have Philadelphia. But Washington wanted to protect his soldiers, rather than risk losing men in a direct battle. He let the British take the city. He then moved his men to Valley Forge to train and to avoid the British for the winter. I feel so much safer with the troops nearby. This location was easy to defend. It was also close enough to York, Pennsylvania, to protect Congress as it met there. The Continental Army gains allies. What do you say we fight on the same side? Patriot leaders needed allies to win the war. In 1776, Congress had sent Benjamin Franklin to Paris, France to seek help. Parlez-vous français? My name is Marquis de Lafayette, and I will fight for America. France agreed to supply arms and to loan money to Congress. Some European soldiers also joined the Patriot cause. A 19-year-old Frenchman, the Marquis de Lafayette, became a general in the Continental Army. Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a German soldier, played a key role in training colonial troops. We surrender! In mid-1777, about 9,000 British troops crossed the border from Canada. About 2,000 Vermont and New Hampshire soldiers attacked them. Other Continentals rushed to help. That October, with his army trapped at Saratoga, New York, British General John Burgoyne surrendered to American General Horatio Gates. The Battle of Saratoga was a turning point in the war. The colonists had defeated British troops. France now sent troops and ships to help the colonists. Spain pledged to support France, since Dutch merchants were trading with the Americans. Banks loaned the Americans money. The Continental Army had strong allies. The British again tried a new strategy. For the next 3 years, they fought in the southern colonies, where loyalists would help them. But the war did not go well there for Great Britain. In 1781, Spain captured a British fort in Pensacola, Florida. Stop! Then, that summer, a large British force marched to Virginia coast, but the French Navy stopped enemy ships from bringing the British support from New York, and Washington's army and thousands of French soldiers arrived from the north. I surrender! They trapped the British in the port of Yorktown. For more than 2 weeks, they pounded the British with cannon fire. Finally, British Lieutenant General Charles Cornwallis surrendered. We are so thankful you were here! The Battle of Yorktown was the last big battle of the war. With the help of their French allies, the Continentals had won a key victory. The Treaty of Paris. After their defeat at Yorktown, the British were ready to end the war. They were now fighting France and Spain, as well as their former American colonies. Representatives from all these countries met in Paris to work out a peace treaty. No trading is going to happen here. Meanwhile, the fighting went on. The British Navy shut down American shipping on the seas. On land, the British still controlled New York City, Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. To the west, small but bloody battles were fought in Ohio, Kentucky, and western New York. Continental soldiers fought against British soldiers, Loyalists, and Native Americans. Women and children on both sides were killed. In September 1783, the war finally ended with the Treaty of Paris and this set of agreements. Great Britain agreed to recognize the United States of America as an independent nation. Great Britain also gave the new country a huge amount of land. This included all the territory that was east of the Mississippi River, south of Canada and the Great Lakes, and north of Florida. Wait, what? This area included land that the British had promised to Native Americans. The British kept control of their lands in Canada, but returned Florida to Spain. I actually didn't get any of my things back. In the treaty, the United States promised to restore the rights and property of Loyalists, but many of the new nation's citizens did not keep this part of the agreement. Time to get back to England ASAP. This caused thousands of Loyalists to flee Great Britain, Canada, and other places. Many African Americans who had fought for the British also escaped to other countries. The Patriots had won the war. From this time forward, the former colonists would be known simply as Americans. Summary. I surrender. You have learned how the colonists defeated the British to become a new country. The Continental Army and Navy were weaker than those of the British, but unlike the British, the Continentals were fighting at home. They had stronger motivation to win, and they could fight a defensive war. In contrast, British had to try to control large amounts of territory as well as defeat the Continental Army. We are so thankful you were here. When the Continentals won the Battle of Saratoga, powerful allies joined them. In the decisive Battle of Yorktown, French soldiers and ships helped the Continentals defeat the British. The Treaty of Paris recognized American independence. It also gave a huge amount of land to the United States. How did the widespread fighting affect Americans who were not in the military forces? What happened to groups of people such as women, African Americans, and Native Americans?